All right, so the recording has started. And once again, if you don't want to be in the recording, another way that you can do that is just by turning off the visual, if you'd rather do that. My name is Lynn, and I'm really, really grateful to be here with all of you tonight. And I really appreciate the invitation, not only for me to be here, but to be here with George Hrbek. As a lot of you probably know who read the story, George and I worked closely together over a number of months to write the story that many of you probably read. But this is the first time that we've actually come together and done a workshop together. So it means a lot to me to be here with George. And what I'm going to do is briefly introduce myself, briefly introduce George, and then we're going to go ahead and jump right into the workshop. So I'm a former high school history teacher. I stepped away from teaching to found a website called crossculturalsolidarity.com. On that website, I'm actually about to release the 100th racial justice history resource. So I'm kind of proud to be hitting that milestone. And also the website is going to be completely redone by the end of Black History Month next month. And speaking of Black History Month, I'm going to be releasing new Black history resources every day on the project's Facebook page. So if you want to plug into some great Black history resources during February, just go on Facebook, type in cross-cultural solidarity, and all that will come up. And I also am the creator of the White Anti-Racist Ancestry Project. And it's in that capacity that George and I work together. And so with that said, that's my introduction for myself. And I'll say a few words about George, even though many of you, read George's story. He was a minister in Selma during the very early years of the civil rights movement, doing civil rights work in Selma. And as a white person, especially, that was work that not a lot of people were doing in Selma in those days. And George was really pushing white folks to begin to step into that work. He had to leave Selma before the really major Selma movement kicked into high gear. And he actually moved to Oklahoma at the time when Cesar Chavez's, the farm workers movement was starting to pick up steam. And he actually did migrant ministry in Oklahoma during the early years where the farm workers movement was starting to come to fruition. And George also, of course, had his own ministry that he was doing in his own church that he was running in addition to doing migrant ministry. In the Black Power era, he moved up to Chicago, and he had a chance to sit down with Martin Luther King in the basement of a union hall and to brainstorm what a powerful political education program might look like during a time when Martin Luther King was starting to turn his attention towards taking on systemic racism. And so they had this brainstorming session, and it helped George. That was part of George founding a community that became known as the Mansion, which was a pretty powerful white anti-racist community where there were also some pretty deep dive political education programs that George helped to create, really looking at how white people could get beyond surface level work and take it and really tackle the roots of systemic racial inequities. So during George's time in Chicago, he worked closely with people like Fred Hampton. Members of the Rainbow Coalition came through the community that he helped to found. And because he's and Jesse Jackson, the Breadbasket campaign, and because he was kind of doing some pretty radical stuff, the church once again got angry at him, and he was forced to relocate again, this time to Cleveland, where he has lived and worked and organized ever since. So that's my George Hrbek in a nutshell. And with that said, I want to turn it over to George to say hello to the group in whatever way you'd like to, George. It's really special to have you here with us tonight. And you are muted right now, George.
Okay. I'm really surprised that I was muted. I never mute myself. The only person who can mute me is Stephanie.
Oh, could we spotlight George, please, so we could see him just a little better? Could the host do that?
We'll work on that. See if this helps. Does that help?
Can you see me? I can see you.
Yeah.
All
Yay,
right.
much better.
How's that?
Thank you.
Am I there now?
Yeah,
Look-
you're in the spotlight, George, and the floor is yours if you'd like to introduce yourself or just say hello to the group for a minute.
Well, I just want to say that it's a privilege for me to be participating with you all tonight. And I wish that I had an opportunity to be there personally, because I want to, I think, you know, you may hear about me, but I'd like to hear more about you and your journey and your perspectives. And so it's important for me, not simply for me to share with you, but I've always been the person who wants to hear the journeys of other people and where they're at in the struggle and what their challenges are and so on, because it's always a learning opportunity for me. And that still holds true today. But anyway, it's a privilege for me to be here, and I want to listen, and I'll be interested about I'll be interested in the questions that you're going to direct at me, because I think the questions again will force me to really think about things, reflect on them, and feed back to you out of my own experience what my own perspectives are.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
thanks for welcoming me.
Thank you so much, George. And actually, we're very much in accordance with the spirit that you just brought forward, because I wanted to now that we've introduced each other, I wanted to invite everyone else into the space to just go around really quickly. Let's hear from everybody. I know that people in the room work with different organizations. So what I want to invite us to do now is to go around and simply introduce your name and the organization that you work with. And then after we do that, we're going to get into some breakout groups. And then after the breakout groups, we can get into a deeper dive conversation with George. And I'm going to go ahead and take George off the spotlight for now, since we're going to be hearing from everybody. And actually, Diana, can you help me do that? I'm not seeing how to take him off the spotlight.
Who's the host? Who's the only one?
Well, I figure that out. Is there anyone who would like to go first and just introduce themselves and the organization that you work with? I see Honora Russell raising your hand.
Can you hear me okay? Is this connected all right?
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm so excited. I don't usually get to participate in stuff like this. I'm a mom. I've got 2 kids who may come in and out. But I'm an occupational therapist. My name's Honora. I live in Sebastopol. And I'm also I just became a lead teacher with an organization called Untraining White Liberal Racism out of the Bay Area. So we teach. I mean, it's so much fun. And looking at your history, it's very looks like there's a lot of commonalities. So working with groups of white people to dive deep in our emotional level of this white conditioning that we've all grown up with. So yeah, I'm excited to hear that you've been doing this for so long, and I'd love to know where to take it from. From like, I want to know what's the next level, I suppose.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Marcia.
My name is Marcy, and I live in Santa Rosa, California. And I'm a member of the Emmaus faith community. And I've been most involved over the years with an organization called Call to Action. And that was a Catholic organization. It started out after the principles of Vatican II were not being seen. And so a lot of bishops and clergy and nuns were very involved with saying, yes, let's make this happen. And it still hasn't. And so Emmaus Faith Community is sort of a disaffected Catholic community. But I am recently, and I was in Denver, Colorado for 35 years, and that's where I was most as a chapter leader for Call to Action. But I'm just so happy to be here and to read your story, George, was phenomenal. Asking what people need. I am not the white savior. That was what I learned from your story. And I thank you for that.
All right, thank you so much. I'm going to ask the rest of us to simply go around and name, say our names and the organization that we work with. And then we're going to get into some breakout groups. And after the breakout groups, we're going to be posing some deep questions to George. But just to make sure that we get into that, I'm just going to ask only for the name and the organization at this time. And David.
David Reardon. Uhuru Solidarity Movement.
Debbie.
Debbie Katz, Boston Workers Circle, which is an over 100-year-old organization founded by the socialist Jewish immigrants to the U.S.
Thank you. Leslie.
First Presbyterian Church, Santa Rosa. I'm part of the anti-racism social justice team. Love reading your story, George. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Reese.
I'm Therese Taylor, and I'm a member of Knox Presbyterian Church, and we organize people of faith against racism.
Thank you so much. And I'm just going to keep going around as I see people, and I'm going to go to Vivian.
Yeah, Vivian Sedney. I currently live in Maryland. Formerly, I was living in Santa Rosa, and I don't really have an organization at this time.
Thank you. Jean Marie.
Jean Marie Manning. I'm with Incarnation Church, also a group called Realistic Living in Dallas, Texas, and the Reevaluation Counseling Community, which is in the Planet.
Thank you. Stephen.
Stephen in Sonoma County. I'll just say my goal, which is to bring anti-racism into my creative work.
Thank you. Gail.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a pastor at Church of the Incarnation, Santa Rosa, and I'm retired. So I do a lot of supply work, which means preaching in other congregations. So I do a lot of teaching sermons, and that's the group I'm working with right now.
Thank you, Gail. Laurel.
So in addition to my work here with Racial Justice Allies, I'm also with First Presbyterian Church, the anti-racism team, and I participate in People of Faith Against Racism.
And Corleen. And Corleen, I think you're muted right now.
I'll be darned. I'm Van Sluicer, and I don't belong to any organization except for the global family.
And I'm Julian Blair, and I belong to an organization which helps immigrants that are trying to come across the border. I can't quite remember the name of the organization, but I have a lot more I could say, but that's it.
Thank you so much. Susan.
I'm also with the Workers' Circle in Boston, a progressive Jewish organization. I'm also a very old friend of Adrian Lobby.
Wonderful. And Miko.
I have a finger in a lot of pies, but probably the most significant one is serving on the board of North Bay Organizing Project, which is a LatinX led social change empowerment organization in Sonoma County.
Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Nahus. I'm a member of the Sonoma County Nonviolence Training Collective, and I'm active with the Green Party at the county and state level, and a few other things, but that's it for now. Over.
And Debbie.
Well, I already spoke. I don't know if it's a different Debbie.
I'm sorry, Debbie.
Yeah.
Honora spoke, so I'm going to hop over to Leslie.
I spoke too. I'm First Presbyterian Church anti-racism team and also People of Faith on Thursdays at Knox.
And Anne.
Hi, I'm with Shomrei Torah and the Social Action Committee there, and we're currently starting a racism group ourselves.
Alyssa.
Hi, everyone. Alyssa Ursum from Fallston, Maryland. I was invited here by Vivian through Little Falls Quaker meeting. And I like that a finger in a lot of pies. I'm on the DEI committee of both my daughter's schools, but 2 community colleges where I work and, wherever I'm involved. And the main things would be coming to the table. I'm a facilitator for a monthly racial dialogue meeting through Coming to the Table, and the Maryland Lynching Memorial, the Harford County, Maryland Lynching Memorial Committee, which is loosely under the umbrella of EJI, Equal Justice Initiative. Thanks.
Thank you. Ellen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ellen Vandenberg, and I'm a member at Congregation Shomrei Torah, part of the Social Action Committee, and we just started a subcommittee on racial justice.
And Megan.
Hi, my name's Megan Coffey, and I'm not really with any organization. I'm just really interested in learning more. I am attending one of the untraining workshops as a participant in phase 1 that Honora mentioned, but a different one. I haven't met Honora. Thanks.
And is there anyone who I happen to miss? Jean Marie.
I'm with Jean Marie. My name's Larry Hanel. I'm with an organization called Senior Peer Counselors, and I'm also a court-appointed special advocate for a youth. That's it.
Wonderful, thank you. Is there anyone else who I missed? All right, so as you can see, we just have a wealth of experience and knowledge and wisdom in this room, and there's a lot that we could say and talk about. So I kind of apologize for going around so fast, but at least now we have some understanding of kind of the breadth and depth of the work, that we're all engaged here in this room. And with that said, we're actually going to go straight into our first breakout group of the evening. And the reason why we're going to do that is because in the breakout group, we're going to be in groups of 4 or 5, and we're going to be reflecting on the questions that feel most important to us to ask to George. So we're going to be going into those breakout groups, and that'll lay a strong foundation for us to then come back into the main group and to ask some really excellent questions to George Hrbek. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give some instructions for what we're going to be doing in the breakout group. And actually the first thing that I need to do, let me grab this link really quickly. I am about to drop a link in the chat. Apologies for being a little clumsy about this. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I just dropped a link in the chat, and before I give the instructions, I want to ask everyone to go ahead and open that to make sure that we all have it open. This is a summary of George Hrbek's life, and not so much of his life, but about some of the lessons about community organizing, some of the lessons about what meaningful political education for white people looks like. So the instructions for the workshop are that we're going to be in groups of 4 or 5. We're going to be in the workshop for about 20 minutes. And I want to ask all of you to spend maybe the first 5 minutes reviewing this 2-page reading that just gets to some of the key points. And one of the reasons why I do this is because sometimes it's just nice to refresh our memories. But I also know that many of us have busy lives, and the piece that I wrote about George is a pretty long, substantial piece. And I know that a lot of us might not have had the chance to, maybe some of us didn't get the chance to read the whole thing. This will be a way for you to refresh your memory. If you didn't have a chance to read the whole thing, this summary will really help you out. So what we're going to do is spend about 5 minutes reading the summary. And then for the remaining 15 minutes, talk amongst yourselves about what you think. If you could ask George only 3 questions, what would those 3 questions be? And then once you've identified 3 questions, continue talking amongst yourselves and think about if there was one essential question that you could ask George, what would that one essential question be? And it will really help to have a note taker in your group in order to keep track of those questions. So when you get into the groups, someone volunteer to be a note taker, write down those 3 questions. And then when we get back into the whole group, I also want to ask that note taker, when it's your group's turn to pose a question to George, to also put the 3 questions in the chat. So I want to ask the note taker to be taking notes on the computer so that they can copy and paste that and put that into the chat. So I know I just said a lot, and I want to check in with everyone before we actually get into our breakout groups and see if there's any questions to make sure that we're clear about what we're about to do.
I have a question.
Yeah, thank you, David.
Are there going to be facilitators identified in the group, or groups or not?
No, I didn't. We're not planning to have identified facilitators in the group. So you guys can figure it out amongst yourselves. Just spend the first 5 minutes reading and then have a conversation amongst yourselves about the questions that you'd like to ask. Are there any other questions before we get into the breakout groups?
How long are the groups for?
The breakout groups are for 20 minutes. And the first 5 is for reading, and then 15 minutes of conversation. Yeah, Dina, and then Alyssa, or Dinah, I'm sorry.
I just want to say, since I'm the one doing the Zoom thing, that I will send you a message at the last, when there's 5 minutes left in the 20 minutes. So you'll know,
Oh, there are questions.
All right, so I hope that you guys had wonderful breakout groups and that you came up with some really interesting questions. And now it's time to pose those questions to George. And actually, Dinah, I think I'm forgetting exactly how we're going to go about this. Are you going to be calling on people, or do you want me to call on one representative from each group?
I can call on people, that's fine.
Okay. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Dinah to call on folks, and then one person from each group will pose the questions. And the person who was the note taker, as your group goes, also please put those notes in the chat so we could see them there too.
Okay, so would a note taker put their hand up? Would you, all the note takers, put your hands up? Okay, Laurel, Leslie, Gail, who else? Miko. Maybe, was that it? There should be one more.
We have 2 screens, two.
Oh, we do?
Don't we? We did.
Okay, so who did I not call?
Me, Linnell.
Okay, Linnell, Miko, Laurel, Leslie, and Gail. Gail. Okay, so Gail, would you pose your questions and write it into the chat?
They're in the chat. 1, 2, 3. 1, if we look at the catapult as an octopus of injustice, it has different arms like poverty or economic inequality or educational inequality or living conditions. How did George find a focus? And two, if we live in a community of white privilege, how do we engage with people and get their attention and speak honestly with love? And three, how do you speak with a racist?
Put those in the chat. I'm not finding them.
They're there.
Under Gail?
No, they're under, it says from me to everyone. They're numbered 1, 2, and 3.
I see Linnell.
Should I?
Yes, some of them.
These questions now?
Yeah, actually, George, I'm going to chime in here real quickly. So I believe, and I want to actually double check this with the group. I believe we have 5 minutes to answer either group. Each of the group has 5 minutes for the question. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So George, well, they're going to pose the questions, and then you'll have about 5 minutes to answer the questions however you like. And then I'm going to go ahead and when we have only 1 minute left, I'm also going to give you a reminder that you have 1 minute left to finish answering the questions for each specific group. So if you'd like to go ahead and respond to.
You think I could answer those questions in 5 minutes?
No, I think you probably need to pick one, George, and then just speak to that.
Yeah, pick one.
Can you repeat the questions again?
The first one is, if we look at the catapult as like an octopus with different arms, like in just poverty, economic inequality, educational inequality, or living conditions, ghettos, how did you find a focus? So that's the first one. Second one is, if we live in a community of white privilege, how do we engage with people and get their attention? And how do we learn to speak honestly with love? And then the third question is, how do you speak with a racist?
Well, the first one is, for me, the catapult really gets at the heart of all of those issues, because all of those issues that you talk about, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about poverty, whatever it may be, for me, goes back to the issue of caste, of racism. All of those issues and those challenges exist in our community, from my perspective, due to classism and racism. So if you're dealing when you're going to be dealing with the issues of racism, systemic racism, you're dealing with policies and practices. Some of them are practices that are not written down any place. They've just been in existence for so long. It really cuts across everything, all of those issues, including climate change. So I would say you can't separate any of those issues. And if you're focusing on just dealing with the whole idea of caste, of racism as it existed in this country, and bigotry, and the division between the somebodies and the nobodies, you're really getting at all of those issues, because all of them have come into being because of those issues. The second question that they asked me, how do you talk to a racist? You listen. First of all, you have the capacity to listen without jumping in too quickly. And you've got to be able to do that in a way in which you don't want to become punitive, or you don't want to become angry. You want to listen, and then you play devil's advocate. You challenge some of those issues, but when you challenge them, you're challenging by sharing with that person your values and what counts for you, what's important to you. So it's a willingness to listen and to really share openly and honestly with that person. What comes out of that? Maybe nothing, but maybe something. And I've had experiences both ways. Am I 5 minutes up?
George, man, you got 2 whole minutes left.
Oh, I do. Well, then the third question.
The third question was, we live in a community of white privilege. So how do we engage people in this work? How do we get them excited? I mean, I'm a preacher and I go into a congregation and for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, I have their attention when I'm preaching. What can I do to get people's attention to this issue?
Does your congregation have attention to the issue?
No, I visit people. I do supply work.
Oh, you do supply work.
Right.
Yeah, by the way you engage people is you don't do it as solo, you do it as part of a community. Right. So where you can start, if you can just even put together a small group of 6 to 8 people that you will meet with regularly to honestly share with each other some of the impact of some of these issues on the quality of life in your own community, in the country. But that's where you start. And if something emerges out of that, then they too will begin to become advocates for addressing some of these issues, and perhaps we'll invite other people to enjoy the conversation. But I don't think you can do it on a grand scale. I think you have to start small. And if you can get 5 or 6 people who would be willing to sit down with you on a regular basis, once a week, once a month even, to have dialogue and share with each other and share with each other's journeys and what each of you are struggling with and so on. I think that's the way you start, and you build from there.
Wow, thank you.
All right, George, and that is actually your time for group number 1. And I was imagining that people would have 3 questions and choose one, but you just went through and said some really profound things about all 3 questions. So yeah, thank you. And why don't we move on to, what's that?
It's just off the top of my head, you know.
Pretty cool. So the next.
Yeah. After you do it, Dinah.
Okay. So the next person would be, I'm trying to remember now who it was, Linnell.
Well, I want to interrupt real quick. I'm hearing someone's keyboard pretty loudly. So if you're not George, if everyone else could go ahead and mute themselves.
Okay. So question number 1, how did you know when it was time to move on? What criteria influenced your decision? Did people wanting to work on anti-racism make you want to stay? Number 2, how do you think your humbleness has contributed to your longevity as an activist? And 3, when do you challenge people in their beliefs, and when do you let them find their own way?
Wow. Whoa. Well, first of all, moving on wasn't necessarily always my own choice. I mean, I didn't make a decision to move on from Selma to New Orleans. I was kind of pressured to do that. And it was one of the big mistakes. I look back and reflect and say, I really shouldn't have made that move, but I did make the move, and it was an experience, and it was a learning experience. My next move was really due to the fact that because of my New Orleans experience, I was really beginning to question whether I really wanted to stay in this ministry and continue to be a pastor. So I thought I'd give it one more shot, and I had this opportunity to become the pastor of this church in Oklahoma, out of the South, in a whole different environment and culture and so on. And so I went to Oklahoma, and that was probably that was a way of whether I decided whether I wanted to continue in the ministry. And that became another whole new experience for me, a learning experience, in seeing that this issue of racism extended simply beyond African Americans and Blacks, but also extended to other people of color, brown and so on, the migrant farm workers and so on. And then I was really urged to come to Chicago by Lutheran Human Relations Association of America because the three major Lutheran bodies wanted to be engaged in doing something in addressing racism. And so I got asked to come to put that together in Chicago. And I felt that that probably was where my calling was, so I went to Chicago. I came to Cleveland because I was really kind of excommunicated from the church in Chicago. And I was footloose. I was loading trucks on a graveyard shift for a while to support my family. I went to Europe for 4 months at the invitation of the Evangelische Volkskirche to help them deal with some issues that related to the immigrants coming into Germany. And when I came back, I was footloose and fancy free. And I got this call the day I got back and asked to come to Cleveland. And so I wound up in Cleveland. Now, that's kind of the way I would describe my journey. And in some ways, I don't know how much some of that, maybe Oklahoma was really the more pure decision that I made to go. The others were people asking me to come. What was your second question?
The second question is, how do you think your humbleness has contributed to your longevity as an activist?
I never considered myself very humble. And yeah, I never thought about myself having, in fact, I thought I lacked a lot of humility. But I think, you know, it was my feeling for people. I was taught to appreciate people and learn from other people and respect other people, and also not to react in anger if other people displease me, and even if I was faced with some kind of threats or something, to be able to deal with that in a humorous way. And that, I think that came from my upbringing. So I don't know whether I had humility, but I was raised in this family that was really a blessing, a gift. Not only my parents, but my extended family of grandparents and uncles and aunts, and the values that were instilled within me and encouraged to listen to others and learn from others. My dad encouraged me by telling me that you're not simply going to get your education in a formal educational system. You've got to get out into the world. You've got to get exposed to other people. And I wound up doing a lot of things at the urging of my dad. I worked in a summer resort in the Catskill Mountains for 2 summers in a row. I worked with farm workers harvesting peas and cabbages up in Wisconsin. I worked on a cattle ranch out in North Dakota. I worked in a marina down in Florida. But all of those experiences were really part of my education. And it gave me an appreciation and a respect for people, recognizing that we were all kind of products of our journeys. And even dealing with racists, I try to understand them within the context of the journey that shaped them, and not ignore that. Yeah. I don't know what else to say, but I had this capacity to relate to people.
Yeah, that's huge.
We're gonna have to pause there with the second question. I'm sorry for cutting off the third one, but I want to make sure that we have time for the other groups as well. So can we move on to group number 3?
Yeah, and maybe we do just take one from each group at this point, because I don't think we have three more groups to get to. So, Miko, is there one that was the top from your group?
I think I'd rather let George pick which one.
Okay, so read them.
What gives you hope? What are your thoughts on reparations? What are the obstacles you see now in this work?
So you better pick one.
Well, I can answer a couple of them quickly. Reparations, yes. And I think what form those reparations to take can be creative. And but you know what I thought I could say that one briefly, but that's where I'm at with reparations. What gives me hope? I have to say that that my experience with people of faith and my discipleship, I have to say to you that Jesus means a lot to me, but maybe not in the traditional theological sense, but Jesus is a significant person in my life. And I would quote Jesus when he says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And that kind of summarizes that got me. And to see how he dealt with the issues in his day and the courage that it took and the way he dealt with people and how he convinced the nobodies that they were somebodies. And in fact, that became one of our mottos at Lutheran Metropolitan Ministry. In the kingdom of God, the nobodies are somebodies, and the somebodies have to become nobodies in order to be somebodies. So my hope is really rooted in my association with other people, with the associations I've had with Dr. King, but even some other people that we've never heard of who played a significant role in my life. Rosa Young, I think of some of those people, their tenacity, their ability to hang in and to be 11 in the midst of their own time and so on. And therefore I think what Lynn is doing, in some ways, by telling the stories of people who have been involved in the past in these issues, is also a source of hope. We're part of a movement that has historical roots, and that's going to be going on in the future, and we play our role during our time on Mother Earth in order to see that the movement keeps going. Being involved in the struggle itself in community is something that just gives richness to your life, that strengthens you, that keeps your spirit alive and gives you hope.
Great.
Thank you so much, George. And in the spirit of time, let's just go ahead and move on to the next group. And
Okay. Laurel.
Okay, George, here's another light one for you. Can systemic racism be dismantled within the systems of capitalism, patriarchy, settler colonialism, or does everything have to be overthrown?
Well, I do think that our democracy, as imperfect as it is, if we think about government of the people, by the people, and for the people, gives us an opportunity to affect change. And I think history proves that. I think in spite of everything, in spite of slavery and so on, when you think about what's emerged out of the actions of people, we're talking about the end of child labor, we're talking about women's suffrage and so on. And that has to continue. So I think, if we're talking about any form of government, because I like socialism, democratic socialism, and I think, some models for us would be Norway and Denmark and some of those Scandinavian countries over there. But anyway, I think, we can affect change. We can't usher in utopia, but we can affect change and move us further along in the realization of a quality of life as was intended for all people. But it's not going to all happen at once, and now, we're at another time which we've hit a roadblock and it's been a regression. So in some ways, I see it as a deja vu, compared to where I was when I was in Selma. And it's going to take the movement of people again, and really working to get leadership that are servant leaders, that have integrity, that have compassion, that have wisdom, and that are really committed to working for the common good for all people. And we have to pick our places where we're going to work on that. And I think if you work on one piece of it, you're kind of beginning to deal with all of it.
Great. Okay, so I think Leslie, you have, what was the number one question from your group?
Well, some of our questions have been asked in other forms already.
Yeah, good.
And Susan had to leave, which was too bad. She was our leader, because it was very late back there. But I would think I would, if everybody's okay with it, would like to ask the last question, which is if we, since we are advantaged, but don't want to be condescending or patronizing, how do we share our resources in ways that work without just rescuing babies?
Well, I think it has to do with really listening to people and listening to those who are on the worst end of the bigotry, of the results of slavery and caste in this country, and by listening to them. And I think then it's because they have the capacity, they've got the wisdom, they've got the knowledge to really address issues. And then I think we can be supportive to them, and how we want to support them. They can tell us how they support. It was interesting when I went to El Salvador and I asked that question, realizing the impact that our country has had on the Salvadorans. I said, what's the one thing you would want me to work on when I get back to the States? And they said, dismantle the School of the Americas, because the School of the Americas has been providing the military assistance and military training for the oligarchies and the dictators in Central America for decades. So, we need to take our cues and we need to be in partnership with them. But they've got what it takes to help us be liberated also. We can think about liberating them, but as they work to liberate themselves, they're also liberating us.
And in your opinion, has it generally been effective to just find out who are leaders in that community and ask to meet with them?
Yeah, if you've got some, there are organizations in each community. And there are organizations, at least here in Cleveland, I can say that in each community in the city, and there are communities, they have their own organizations, especially in the Black communities. They've got, and you find out who they are, who are the leaders, who are the key people, and you get a chance to meet with them. And you can't come in saying, we want to help you. You have to come in saying, we would like you to share with us, and we'd like to share with you. Can we have some dialogue here and learn from each other? And in that process, you will learn how you can be most helpful. We're not talking about charity here.
Right.
Thank you. And how many more groups do we have?
I think we've done them all.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I know that we only have a few minutes left. I want to do a check-in with everyone here to see if we want to try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, or if we want to try to extend this 10 minutes. What are people feeling regarding that right now? Because I know that you guys with Sonoma County Allies for Racial Justice, you have some things that you want to say at the end.
Well, I don't know how we can decide this. I think people who absolutely need to leave can do so. I think what we were going to do, Lynn, I don't think we do have time to go around again to ask people more about what was inspiring to them. But I think you could do the closing you wanted to do, and then Wendy, you could do it for our group. And I think we'll still run over a little, but not too much. So if people can hang in there, let's just go with that.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good to me as well. So what we were going to do originally was to have another kind of end reflection, but this is a really rich kind of discussion, and it's also the first time that we've done this workshop. So keeping track of time is, things. I feel like I'm stumbling over my words. What I was going to say for a wrap-up question, or for my own closing out, was to say that I'm really grateful for George to have the opportunity. We did a lot of work together in creating this story, but this is the first time we've come together and done a workshop, and so this feels really special to me. And I was also I'm actually going to drop a link in the chat here. I was also going to give a shout out for the GoFundMe that I'm doing to help me write the stories of other white anti-racist elders like George, keep the project moving forward. And that's something that people can donate to if they feel called to or inspired to. And I want to say just one quick word about the project, which is I see it as a strategic resource that can help us to mobilize white people in the future. And that means people like you. And it also means, providing role models and resources that parents and teachers of white children can use to raise a white anti-racist generation, which I think ultimately is what we really need to do. And they need role models and stories. So once again, if you want to support that, share it on social media, whatever you want to do. That would, you can do that if you feel inspired to. So that was how I was going to close. And then I was going to pass it off to George to say anything that you would really like to say to the group in closing reflections.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. I know, I realize we're short on time.
Well, I mean, the thing that I would emphasize is that this work is not simply the work of lone wolves. It's the work of people together, and that's why community is so important. Because within community, you are also being something to each other that encourages you, that strengthens you, that keeps the juices going. And a community in which you feel comfortable and able to share anything that you wish to share with, that they have your back, you have their back. But this work of anti-racism, or dealing with any of the issues, takes a community, a collective of people, and some of those communities already exist, and we don't have to necessarily create them. It's finding out where they're at and becoming part of them. And I would say that's what's really kept me going all of these years. Is no matter where I've been, no matter what challenges I was faced with, I was always part of a community in which we were really committed to each other and committed to working together in a common cause, and really being a source of encouragement and wisdom for each other, and working out together how we wanted to do it. So it's community. It's not something you do simply on your own. You're doing it as part of a collective of people who have a common commitment to each other and have learned from each other's journeys and experiences, because we all have something to share with each other, and together working with a focus, not going to solve all the problems, but working on a focus on dealing with an issue that's related to dismantling the white domination and suppression in this country.
Wonderful.
And what I want to say that I was really interested with the questions you came up with. And I'd almost want to have your questions again in writing fed back to me.
You will.
Because somehow I feel like I don't know whether I also answered those questions as adequately as I want, since we're on the time constraints, and I understand that. But it's been a good session for me also. Thank you.
Thank you, George.
Yeah. Yeah.
If it's okay, I'm going to just do some closing remarks, Lynn.
Absolutely, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know all of you are eager to jump off, but I just want to have some closing remarks. We only have a little bit of time, but usually we open it up for announcements. So in this, for the sake of time, if you have any announcements of racial awareness, racial justice issues, articles, books, anything that you'd like to share with us that you feel is relevant to the group and would help us, what we do is we take the notes that are in the chat box and we clean them up and share them with everyone later, so that you have access to those resources and announcements. So please put those in the chat box again if you have any announcements of events or anything that you'd like us to participate or learn about. I'm also posting into the announcement the contact for Racial Justice Allies of Sonoma County. If you'd like to get involved or hear about other workshops that we're doing in the future, I've listed our website, our Facebook page, and our email address. So feel free to contact us anytime and help us spread the word, because when you pass along our website or our email to other people, it lets them get involved, hear about our workshops. Everything that we do is free. We're all volunteers. And so we're always looking for more people to collaborate with and to do other projects with, like just what George was saying. We need to do this in community. We can't do this work on our own as individuals. So that's what's exciting, is that there already is a racial justice community right here in your own town and or wherever you live in the other states across the US. And so you can find those communities and join them and see where you can feel the most, connected and where you fit in. So thank you. Thank you all. I hope you'll send me your email addresses. If you're not already on our racial justice list, then send me your email address and I'll add you to our list so you can get our little announcements. They only go out about once a week. And they let you know what's happening or what to read or what's going on. So thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again.
Keep the fires of the spirit burning.
Thank you, George.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Thank you, George. It was wonderful to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Lynn, I'm going to ask you to gather the notes in the chat for me so I can clean it up.
Oh yeah, how do I do that?
Or no, Linnell will do it. I think Linnell will do it.
Yeah, I've got them already. Thanks.
Thank you, Linnell.